be. William Jay summed up Newton's response to this sickness like this: he had the tenderest disposition and always judiciously regarded his friend's depression and despondency as a physical effect, for the removal of which he prayed, but never reasoned or argued with him concerning it. He did one other thing in the meantime to help his brother. He was thinking creatively. He knew this man was a poet, and so in 1770 he resolved, when Cooper's brother died and he was threatening to go into another one of those horrible dark seasons, he asked him to collaborate with him in writing hymns, one a week for the people of God. He said, you write one and I'll write one, to get him to write. And after 67 hymns, Cooper stopped. Newton kept going until there were 300 only hymns. And today we have them. Amazing Grace is one. There is a fountain filled with blood, Cooper. God moves in a mysterious way, and others. But it worked for a while, and then it stopped working, and the poetic juices stopped flowing for hymns, and you read horrible, horrible poems, some of them, like The Outcast, that he wrote about his own darkness. So that's the first person I would mention. The next one is Henry Martyn, the missionary. Henry Martyn had an awful experience one day by going to Richard Cecil and asking for his counsel, and Cecil had heard him preach and criticized him for, quote, the insipid and inanimate manner in the pulpit. Now this devastated Henry Martyn, and so where did he go? He went to Newton and asked his help. And Newton heard 3 reasons why Martyn should be discouraged, and he blocked every one of them with hope. I'll skip the first and just mention the second too. This is a quote from Martyn's journal. On my saying that perhaps I should never live to see much fruit, he answered, I should have the bird's eye view of it, which would be much better. And when I spoke of the opposition that I should be likely to meet with, he said, he supposed Satan would not love me for what I was about to do. And then the old man prayed afterwards with sweet simplicity. So you've got this Richard Cecil who just decimated the guy, and then you've got Newton who got him to Persia. Don't you want to be one of those people who get your people to Persia? I'd like half my people to go to Persia. And then there's Thomas Scott. Some of you have heard of Thomas Scott. He wrote the book Force of Truth. Thomas Scott was a liberal, almost Socinian, Newton said, parish minister, one parish over. Just a rotten guy. Didn't visit anybody when they were sick, didn't care for his people, preached liberal gibberish, and heard this evangelical was in the local parish and just mocked his doctrine. And Newton, through a long series of experiences of doing some pastoral care for dying people in Scott's own parish, and then meeting with him and refusing to be controversial and loving this guy, and then writing him letters over a 10-month period, broke him, changed him, won him, and he became the next evangelical pastor at Olney. Triumphed over his liberalism, his Socinianism, through his remarkable, theologically acute, but loving, tender demeanor. So those are some examples of persons. Now let me shift over to patterns of tenderness in the life of Newton. I see a pattern of patience and perceptiveness. Take those two words and give you a quote from where I'm getting those two words. Patient He was a patient man and a perceptive man. He wrote this. Apollos, he's talking about the man in Acts 19. Apollos met with two candid people. He's talking there about Aquila and Priscilla. Apollos met with two candid people in the church. They neither ran away because he was legal, nor were carried away because he was eloquent. That's good. You see what he's saying there? He's talking about the way he wants to be and the way he wants us to be. Don't run away from the error and ugliness in the heads, hearts, or bodies of the people you're meeting because it turns you off. And don't be swept away by all their power or beauty or whatever. If the surface thing is repelling, don't be repelled. And if the surface thing is attractive, don't be attracted. Be patient with the first. Be penetrating and perceptive with the second. That's the liberty of the pastoral tenderness and toughness. You're going to be tender and patient with what repels, and you're going to be tough and through-seeing with any kind of eloquence that might attract you for fleshly reasons. So there was a patience and there was a perception in this man, and he wasn't overly impressed with anybody's gifts, and he wasn't driven away by their faults and their ugliness. He said in another place, and this is really Puritan, vintage Puritan, "Beware, my friend, of mistaking the ready exercise of gifts for the exercise of grace." The Puritans had a profound grasp of the difference between gifts and graces. Gifts can be there without grace. Many of our people do not know that distinction exists. They think if a guy can really preach, he must be godly. Not true. Not true. Now, maybe the most illuminating way to get at this man's pattern of tenderness is to talk about the way he handled his Calvinism and his doctrine and controversies of his day and so on. This is something I'm very, very interested in for us and for myself in particular. At this point, we're going to see the root bearing fruit in tenderness. The root of truth bearing fruit in tenderness called love. I think his patience and his perception guided him between a doctrinaire intellectualism over here and a doctrinal indifference and carelessness over here. So let's talk for a minute about his patience, tenderness as it relates to his doctrine. Here's what he says first. A lot of people ask me, I've been here 20 years now, so I'm starting to feel old, and people are starting to treat me that way. And so I get asked a lot about what did you do at this point, and this point, and this point to get this. He said, I have been 30 years forming my own views. And in the course of this time, some of my hills have sunk and some of my valleys have risen. But how unreasonable within me to expect all this should take place in another person, and that in a course of a year or two? I mean, some of you have been on your way theologically for 20, 30, 40 years, and you might have a thing or two figured out. And you start preaching and teaching as though this class should have fixed the atonement for these people. Predestination, we got this now. You've been to my classes. And it took you 20 years to settle in on where you are. So he's calling for us with tenderness and patience to realize that that's the case. It's not going to happen for our people any faster than it did for us, and for some slower.